Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Sense of Place Season 15. I actually put on my notes here, introduce self, because I feel like I always forget to do that. So I'm Sarah Fox. I'm the host and curator of Sense of Place. I'm really excited to be here. Mountain biking, of the many sports that I learned when I first came to the Gorge, mountain biking was the one that held my attention, and I fell in love with it. So I want to thank everyone who's tuning in from home. I know it was a very hot event tonight, and a lot of you ended up needing to tune in from the live stream. It means a lot to me that you guys are doing that, and for those of you who were able to donate, it does make a big difference, so thank you. So tonight we're going to look at the history of mountain biking in Post Canyon, how this forest evolved to include mountain biking, what the growing pains have been, what it looks like now, and what the future might look like. And to do this, we're going to take a page out of Taylor Swift's book. And Swiftie right here, guys. Did you hear that? And we are going to do sort of a little eras tour of Post Canyon and mountain biking. And so the first half of the show will be this eras tour so we can all get our bearings and have a sense of here's what Post Canyon was, here is how it's moved through sort of these three different eras that each of our speakers will present on. And then once we've all gotten our bearings and are all kind of on the same page, we're going to shift and be more conversational about what's going on since those eras. So we'll do that, and then after the conversation, we'll have some time for Q&A, so get your questions ready. Before we get to that, I want to thank our sponsors, especially our presenting sponsors, the Columbia Gorge News and the Healthy Community Collective here. And I also want to thank Mount Adams Institute. Sense of Place is a program of Mount Adams Institute. And MAI is a local nonprofit that is working on a national level to help connect all sorts of people with work in the natural stewardship fields all across the country. But they're here in the Gorge, and they support Sense of Place. So it's great to have them. So tonight, I want to start with a little bit of a crowd survey. Raise your hand if you were here because you are a mountain biker. Nice. Okay. Are you a mountain biker? Okay. All right. Raise your hand if you're here because you love Post Canyon. Forest, just the whole forest. Raise your hand if you're, and I know sometimes government officials get scared about this. Raise your hand if you work for the government. You know I love you, government folks, so don't worry. Public servants, we need of you guys. All right. So where the story is going to start is the fact that Post Canyon, maybe above all else, is a community forest. And we're going to hear some tonight about what that means. But right now, before we get started, I want to make sure to point out that as a community forest, there have been people wandering these woods for a very long time. Tribal members used it, still do, hunters, fishermen, motos, hikers, dog walkers. This forest is of a huge service. It means a lot to a lot of people in this community, past and present and future. And I think that's evident in so many people here tonight. So while our focus tonight is going to be through the lens of mountain biking, I just wanted to call that out because it's an incredible backdrop to this story, and I think a great testament to what a local forest like Post Canyon can mean to a community like ours. That said, tonight is mountain biking. So why mountain biking? Sense of Place is all about sharing the natural and cultural history of the Gorge. And what that means in my role is that I spend a lot of time listening to people who are experts in certain areas, historians, tribal members, authors, athletes, folks who know about the Gorge in a unique way that I think is worth sharing. I spend a lot of time listening. And that is actually what prompted this talk tonight. And it happened, I think it was back in 2013. It was many years ago. And I was at an event. Is Jen Klee here tonight? Where is she? Hi, Jen. So I was at an event, and Jen Klee was one of the speakers that night. She wasn't nervous at all. She looked beautiful, and she gave a very lovely talk that included a lot about Matt Klee, who you will hear some about tonight. And there are two things that I remember from that talk. One is not why we're here tonight, but I have to say, I learned that Matt Klee, who I did not know personally, but had a very nice ass. Maybe some of you guys can attest to that. People second it. But the other thing that I remember from that talk is, and I'm sure I won't say it exactly the way she said it, but the way that it stuck in me was Jen said, we have a unique thing here in the Gorge where mountain bikers and people building trails work with our county to do it better, and our county works with them. And it maybe was just in passing, but for someone like me who's always looking for what are those things that help clarify this place and show others why we are who we are, that stuck in my head. And it's been a long time since you did that talk, so it stuck in my head for a long time. So flash forward a few more years, and we had a talk on public lands and timber. It was another panel talk where we had 4 people, someone from the Forest Service, someone from the county, someone from an environmental law firm that was the type that often sues the Forest Service at the county, and someone from one of our local forest cooperatives. And at that talk, Les Perkins, is Les here tonight? He knows to be a little scared. Les Perkins was there. He was a county commissioner at the time, and so he was representing the county. And he said something also just sort of in passing that stuck in my mind, which was that Hood River County, unlike a lot of counties, held on to their forests and maintained local control. And he talked more about why, and you're going to hear more tonight about why that was and what that meant. But again, he said it was sort of unique that we did that. And so Jen's comment and Les's comment, in my mind, made me think, God, is there a reason these two things happen, and is there a reason that they might be connected? And so as we came upon 15 years, I thought it made a lot of sense to finally understand this topic more and why here in this place we have this relationship and this very hardworking forest and this incredible mountain biking community and this incredible trail-loving community. And so that's how we ended up here tonight. And so the next big question I had, and this is often the hardest, was how do we tell such a big story? And from the get-go, I knew we needed multiple perspectives. And so in talking and thinking and asking around, it became clear that it would be great to have someone from the county. It would be great to have someone from the mountain biking community, and it would be great to have someone who maybe could span a little bit of both and also give us some historical context. So, if you guys don't mind, I'm going to call each person out one at a time, and you can help me welcome them onto the stage. The first person that I want to bring out is a county commissioner, an avid mountain biker, a local historian. He's on more boards than I can name, and I think more boards than he can name. Please help me welcome Arthur Babbitts to the stage. Don't do that to me. Arthur was messing with me backstage. He's like, what if while you're out there, we all leave? And I that's not funny. All right, next, I want you guys to please, I'm looking at my notes as if I don't know who's here, you guys, I'm sorry. Next, we're gonna go to the county side. So this is a certified forester. He has, for how many years now? That is what I need. Since 2011, he's been the, I wanna make sure I say it right, because I know government people care. Hood Rivers County Forestry Director since 2011. Please help me welcome out Doug Teeses. Okay. Doug has been relatively well behaved backstage. Yeah. Okay, and then our last guy, the year this next guy was born is the year you bought your first mountain bike. Was that right?
So, yep.
Okay. So at first glance, you're going to be like, what's this guy doing out here? He's just a little kid. What does he know about history here? I think you will find out tonight that he's been doing this a really long time, even though he hasn't had a really long life yet. And he is incredibly passionate and well-loved and connected and probably hates that I'm out here bragging about him. But I've got the mic, so please help me welcome Gary Pash to the stage. Okay, so Eras Tour. Arthur really wanted to have us all dress in different Taylor Swift outfits, and I was like, Arthur, that's not okay. There's that. Your mic's good. I'm gonna get you to your first slide, and then I'm gonna step back and let you take it away, okay?
You just want me to start talking?
Do you want me to say something?
No, I'm happy to start talking.
Okay, it's never been a problem before for you,
it's
Arthur.
Never been a problem, yeah. So I've actually, this is my 6th sense of place lecture.
You want kudos is what you want.
The reason I bring this up is I went through my notes to look and see what sort of subjects did I talk about previously, and I realized that the one thing that they had in common was that they were all safe subjects. And I say safe because they were subjects that were obscure enough and happened long enough ago that if I made everything up, no one would know the difference. And I promise that I really don't do that. I try to talk from documentary evidence when I am talking history, and I do not make things up often. And today I will try not to do that. But so I would like to talk about what Post Canyon was like before the swarms of recreationalists showed up and started filling it up. So give you some picture of what was going on in the woods before all of you showed up. So, oh, no, I was already on that slide, wasn't I? Okay, so the documentary evidence starts in 1880. That's the earliest thing that I have a very specific date for. But we know without a doubt that native peoples were up there gathering foods, hunting, recreating, wandering around, doing all the sorts of things that we do up there. But we do not have any actual physical evidence of that. And that's for obvious reasons, that there's so much logging and so many fires that have gone through that area that there's really no evidence of things that happened even 10, 15 years ago. So we know in 1880 that John Parker bought a mill from a Mr. Rogers. So obviously there's a history before that, but we know 1880, John Parker bought this mill, and it was, the area instantly became known as Parker's Mill, and then realtors came in and said it should be called Parkertown because it would be easier to sell home lots up there. So around 1880, Parker's Mill became Parkertown, and John Parker set up a mill there, and that's what we're looking at here. We see a picture of the folks at that mill. Now, I want to talk about naming of things up in Post Canyon because, I'm sorry, did I go the wrong way?
Yep, there you go.
Yep. Talk about naming of things because really naming in Hood River has always been very uncreative. So pretty much everything up there is named after people who were up there. And this man in the middle with the big monkey wrench, that's Jack Binns. And he had an amazing ability to photobomb pretty much every photo that we have of Post Canyon. And in fact, he actually appears in a Carlton Watkins photo. And if you know anything about photography, he's like the second most famous American photographer after Ansel Adams. But so he managed to sneak into a Carlton Watkins photo even. But we'll see him again and again as I go through these photos. But so we know Binns Hill was named after him, and Binns Hill Road was named after him. And amazingly, he kind of pushed Parker and Parkertown out of the way, and the staging area, the Binns Hill staging area, that's where Parkertown was. So Mr. Binns, Mr. Jack Binns replaced Mr. Parker and got his name up there. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, actually no, I'm sorry, getting a little bit off here. So other names, we know there was a George Riordan. George Riordan had Angora sheep. He had between hundreds and thousands of Angora sheep, goats, not sheep. goats are important because at one point a pair of these goats with their horns fended off a cougar and led the cougar to be slunking off with his tail between his legs, at least according to the Herd of a Glacier newspaper. So we know that Mr. Riordan, he got things named after him. A.C. Phelps, we know we have Phelps Creek up there, and A.C. Phelps is the guy who that was named after. But the biggest name, of course, is Jedediah Post, who Post Canyon was named after. And I see you guys probably have already figured out that I just made that one up.
I was wondering, that was different than...
Yeah, so no, it's not Jedediah Post. In fact, Post Canyon was just where people went to buy their, to collect fence post material. And we actually have, I did bring, this is prop comedy, so I brought, this is the Bible of place names, Oregon Geographic Place Names, and this actually gives a footnoted reference explaining that Post Canyon, in fact, was where people collected their posts. So let's see. Prop comedy, I know you guys love it. I was going to put the ears on also.
He'll be here all week.
Yeah, exactly. And tip your waitresses.
Do you want to do your thing real quick? I can talk for a sec if you want to do your password there.
Oh, I can probably just do it here. It's just my face. It doesn't recognize me.
I feel bad that you weren't.
Well, it's my notes, so I don't really need the notes.
Okay.
So we're looking at here is the forest at that point. There was a lot of old growth, but there's also a mix of places that have been burned and places that have been cut. So we really get a mix. But this particular log, it says, 3,600 and something board feet, which I think, Doug, that's a lot, isn't it?
That's a lot.
So you probably wouldn't need to cut that many of those logs.
Log,
Yeah. So that's a pretty big log. And by the way, Jack Binns is in this photo too. So the forest then was managed by wind. It was managed by fire. It was managed by cutting. Lots of cutting. There really wasn't anything in the way of replanting or anything like that. Tools of the trade. This is probably a posed photo, but it's just such a wonderful one that I can't resist it. It shows two guys with a misery whip, which was the two-man saw that was used to cut down trees. It has an axe. If you look, you can see the corks on that guy's feet, the little studded shoes that he's got on. He's got the shotgun to protect against the bear and the cougar that were up there. And it looks like a little bottle of moonshine down by the base of the tree there. And that's kind of probably what the loggers in the woods would have carried around. We know that horses and oxen were used for a lot of the labor. You see them, a mix of them up there, and there was actually big fights between loggers as to whether horse or oxen were better. Jack Binns is in this photo also. And steam power was what was used to do all the milling up there. So we have this mill. This is probably the mill at Parker's Mill, or there was actually 1.3 mills up there. And Jack Binns is the guy with the monkey wrench standing in the back, about to turn a valve to start this whole thing up. And they certainly burned a lot of the debris and stuff around there to generate the steam power, which helped them mill everything. So the next image. This is starting to get into more of what the community was like up there. So this was the mill pond. And if you look in closer, you see that it's more than just old crusty loggers. There's kids up there, kids working places they shouldn't be. But there were kids up there, there were families. We know that there was a cluster of a community around there. We know that Mrs. Parker had a guest house where people from the city would come and go to get away from the heat of the summer. We know that people had, as I said, hundreds to thousands of sheep and goats, and there was a lot going on in the woods then, and in fact, really, probably many more people were in the woods then than we see in the woods today. So we're going to move forward a little bit in history, because I only have 10 minutes here. So we're now looking, this is what is now called Kingsley Reservoir. This was called Greenpoint at the time. The operation had to get bigger and spread out farther because trees were getting harder to find. So what they did is they built a log flume that started at 3 different lakes, at Rainy, Black, and North Lakes. And from there, the logs would be cut, timber would be cut, and the logs would be floated down to this mill pond, which you see here. That's a lot of logs in that pond. And there they would go into the mill, which is this mill. That is a big mill. I count 14 smokestacks on that, so each one of those corresponds to one of those steam power mechanisms. This is where they would mill the logs down to cants. The cants would then go on a 10-mile ride on a flume, which sounds like a lot of fun. Try to count the number of people in this picture. I think there's roughly 25 people in this picture. I can't be positive. But so the cants would be going down this flume. They would have to go up out of the Ditch Creek drainage, up into Phelps Creek drainage, and then they would go downhill from there. And really, they followed the same gravity lines that mountain bikers like to follow. And so if you were mountain biking up there when the flume existed, pretty much any place you would be riding, you would see this enormous flume that was carrying wood down. And it carried it down to the flatlands. So this is, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out exactly where this is, and it turns out that the period map was actually an error on this. But we now, I'm 90% sure that this is at the intersection of Post Canyon Road and Country Club Road on the northwest corner of that, and northwest, yeah. If you, next time you're there, take a look at that field there and imagine this size operation there. There's cants being milled down into dimension lumber. From there, the flume continued on down to Ruthden. So this is down at the bottom of Morton Road, below Ruthden Point, and this is where stuff could be put on the railroad. You see all of the railroad ties stacked over there. You also see some dimension lumber. We know that, and you also, I hope you can see where the flumes end. I would point, but then I would twist my back and wouldn't be able to show you exactly where it is. But hopefully you can see where the flumes end over there. So they loaded that lumber on and they shipped it away, and it was used to build railroad across the state. It was used to build Portland. Lumber from Oregon was used to rebuild San Francisco after the earthquake. Just an amazing amount of lumber was taken out of this area through this pathway. Which brings me to the final slide, which is here. We're now up to we're up in probably late 1920s or early 1930s. By then, much of the timber had been cut. There had been many fires that had burned through there, and this is probably not unrepresentative of land that you would find up there. The Depression completely destroyed or severely destroyed severely reduced the demand for timber. And with the quality of timber declining and the demand for it declining, many of the local lumber companies either went bankrupt or left. And in the process of leaving that, there were foreclosures that resulted in the county owning large pieces of land. And I'm actually going to just turn it over to Doug, who's going to tell you what the county did with it.
There you go. This is our costume change. Thank you.
Oh, no.
All right, thank you, Arthur, for that lead in there. Yeah, I'd like to just, for the next era, really starts in the 40s for me, and I call it kind of the era of forest growth. So we just got done hearing from Arthur how much of those forests up there in the hill, up towards you look from Hood River toward Defiance, a lot of those forests up on the hill were cut over and left. And that left a lot of the counties across, like a lot of counties in the Northwest, they were left with a dilemma. One of their main tax revenue bases was tax revenue from the property that would be paid. Well, a lot of these companies and landowners went bankrupt. They left everything behind. And so the counties were like, what are we going to do? We're not making any money on this. A lot of the counties in Oregon decided to deed that property to the state to manage on behalf of the counties. And that happened. A good example of that is Tillamook State Forest, for example. A lot of Tillamook County was deeded to the state. So they elected to do that. It gave away some of that control from local control onto the state level. And that had ramifications many, many decades later. But Hood River County, the leaders said, hey, this is an asset that we can manage long term. It's going to grow back, and we want to keep it. So in 1945, the county leadership decided to designate Hood River County Forest as designated county forest. So that's kind of where things really started. And I'm going to switch to the next slide here. And if we look at that screen up there, the dark green is Hood River County Forest today. It's about 34,500 acres. And a lot of the talk that we're going to start moving toward today is going to talk about the stuff in the northwest corner of that green up there. It really runs from Post Canyon Creek, Rorden Hill Road, Family Man area, and over to Benz Hill and up toward Kingsley. That's where a lot of the core of our trail system is in the northwest area, and we'll be talking more about that. But Those lands are all part of what was acquired originally, and we're really unique in Oregon. I mean, there's only a few other counties that did what Hood River County did, and so it's really special. Kind of looking at my notes here, figure out what I left out. So over time, the county forest started to grow back, and minimal harvest occurred in the 40s and 50s, and even the 60s. Things started to get harvested a little bit, and there was some volume out there, but again, as we saw in some of those photos, it was mostly cut over, and it just takes time to grow back. However, by the 70s, significant harvest revenue began to be realized for the county, and at the same time, the county forest had remained popular for recreational users. I mean, there was a lot of horseback riding and hiking, and we even started to see a little bit of, well, certainly we still had hunting. We started to see a little bit of motorized use in the 70s, and just driving around. People would drive around through the county forest, and people still do that today. So, yeah, one of the documentations that I saw from some correspondence in the 70s showed that it was actually a concern. A lot of the motorcycles themselves, originally a lot of them were just riding on the roads and skid trails and things like that were left over out there, but some folks were actually starting to go off-road more, and people were starting to be concerned about what kind of damage that might do to the soils. So that was something clear back in the 70s we picked up on. So 1972, that kind of marked a pivotal point for the county forest. By then, the county was being fully managed back in-house. They had a county forester at that time, and that was when we had our first actually official forest management plan. It really set up the county forest to be managed sustainably long-term to provide a revenue stream well into the future. And that was really important. It was something the county would be able to depend on. So one of the aspects of that is that revenue would go directly to the county general fund, and it really helped to offset taxes in the future needs to raise taxes. We were able to hold back on that in the 70s and 80s, and that benefited all the county citizens. The property taxes did not go up as much as they would have without the county forest revenue. And that stuck with us today, and Hood River County has generally a lower tax rate than many of the other counties in Oregon. Again, in the 1980s, we really saw an increase in revenue. The county forest really started to come back and hit a head of steam, and we were able to raise the allowable cut a little bit because it was growing faster. The trees were much more marketable. They're getting to be a good size, getting a better value for it, and things just really were getting better all around. One of the other thing is that I noticed in 1980, there's an article that was written, and we saw one of the first trails in Seven Streams in that Post Canyon Flume Creek area, from Seven Streams up to what is now Family Man, was built by a few equestrian riders through that section. And they noted while they were constructing it that they remembered there was ash falling through the trees from Mount St. Helens. And so that dates us to the spring of 1980. And of course, we knew that, as Arthur mentioned too, there had certainly been horseback rider use and that kind of stuff since people settled the area, so that long before then. But as it relates to really trails, that was one of the earlier trails that I saw documented. So what happens on the county forest? What does it mean when I say, there's forest management out there? What kind of things might you see? Every year, we plant, we reforest. We call it reforestation, and we usually plant anywhere from 200,000 to 250,000 trees a year. We do it every year. It's required by the Forest Practices Act, and frankly, if we can't grow that wood for the future, then we won't have it, and we won't be able to harvest it in the future either. So that's a really key part of what makes things sustainable for us. From a forest land management standpoint, in the early 90s, forest trails of any type were not noted yet in the forest management plan. And they were still new, and they just weren't to a critical mass yet. there were a few trail users compared to now, but it was still really dispersed. Some conversation had began to happen at the county level, though, certainly amongst staff, about how to address it, yet the trails remained unrecognized. We kind of noticed, a little bit surprised, that people didn't really ask the landowners if they could build the trails. They just went out there and started building trails. And staff started running into more and more unauthorized trails. And here's a few types of trails that we started to see this kind of stuff. Now, some of these pictures are probably by the early 2000s already, but it was this kind of stuff. And it was turning into more and more of it all the time. And, you know, by April of 2001, there was an update to the County Forest Management Plan. We do that periodically, and it identified a need for procedures to recognize the bicycle and ATV trails. Literally, there had already been definitely some conversations, contacts with the Board of Commissioners and others out there, and it was starting to become a real issue. And people thought, well, man, if there was a way to recognize these trails out there, we could start to address some of the current concerns that we were running into, like adjacent landowners were complaining about it. What about trail maintenance? How does that need to be done? And are there seasonal restrictions and things like that we need to be considering? But without a policy or any plan that really addresses it, we just didn't have a good way to work with the trails that were showing up.
And with that, we move on to our third era, which is kind of running parallel, because we've heard from the county perspective what you're observing, but there's people building trails. And that is where we're going to do another musical chairs and hear from Gary Pash. Thank you, Jack.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach here, just because the scope of what I know is of a completely different era. My name is Gary Pash. I am 36 years old and was raised here in the valley. I'm now married and supported by my lovely wife, which is somewhere around here, and the proud father of a 10-month-old daughter, or 10-week-old daughter, sorry. I'm also the founder of School of Send, a local mountain bike camp, and the owner of Sendscapes Trail Building and Earthworks. I was raised up in Parkdale on a 20-acre farm where we mostly raised animals, and that's where my true love for anything with wheels that moved really blossomed. I loved building jumps and hitting all these little features that I would build on my $5 bike that I got at a garage sale or pieced together out of the junkyard. And I would just go exploring and build whatever would come to my mind. I want to fast forward to when I was 10 years old. That was in 1998. It was the first year that I had ever ridden in Post Canyon. We went to the local mountain bike shop, Mountain View Cycles, where I was like, okay, there's got to be some trails around here that have jumps, like, you know, Surveyor's Ridge is pretty boring. I want to go ride something different. And the shops told me about Family Man and all the cool trails up there. So my mom and I drove up there, and I discovered Dropout and Family Man with all these cool log rides and bridges and all these jumps and side hits on the side of the trails, and experienced 7 streams at the time, which would weave in and out of the creek. It wasn't just a flat trail that's now above the creek, kind of set up on the hillside, and we have a couple bridges that cross over, but it was a trail that was more braided and had these side features that kind of worked your way down through the trail, and that's where I really, really, really fell in love with Post Canyon, and that's kind of where it all started. I would go and talk with the local bike mechanics, Jake Felt specifically, and we would go up and build little jumps, like whatever he was working on at the time. And we would improve what was there. And then a little bit further along, I would explore and I would find these trails that people like Douglas Johnson and Kevin Tank and all these like legendary trail builders of the area, Dave Bissett, Jim Moodry, Douglas Van Zant, and there are many, many more, but I would stumble upon some big wooden features and get so fired up and excited to go and build that at home, because we lived in Parkdale and it took a long time to get down here, and my mom didn't ride bikes, so shuttles, and I was young, so flash forward to 2002, we moved down to a country club, and it made it really easy to access the trails for me. I would go on runs up there, or I would ride my bike up, and that is when my mom wouldn't give me a ride. And I would find some random people building trail, and I would just try and help them out. I found, or I was invited to a meeting, one of the first Hood River County Trail Committee meetings when I was 13 years old, by Jeff Blackman, one of my teachers and friends at the time. And during that meeting, I was asked what my ideal trail would be for the area. I told him that I wanted at least 100 jumps from the top to the bottom. And everybody just laughed. And I was a firm believer that it could happen like it has. Soon after that, I went to Henry Buckaloo, who is one of the managers of the recreation up in Post Canyon, and was like, I want to build my own trail. And he also laughed at me because I was 14 years old, and he's like, you can't do that, you're not an adult. So I got Jake Felt and I kind of co-built and co-adopted different trails that we wanted to build. Let me flash forward through. So these are some of the log rides that I would find that GFRA Douglas had built, and others. I believe that's Chorus. And
real quick on this one, when I put this one in the slideshow, the auto caption said that this was a photo of a broken bridge.
Yeah. Yeah, so I would come and stumble across all these bridges, and I just thought they were all so cool. I just wanted to build something like that. Me being super inspired by FMX and the X Games, this is one of the first trails, or one of the first jumps that Jake Felt and I built. Back then, we didn't really use machines. We would do everything by hand, and this landing took us about 3 weeks to dig, and plus we built this extension so that we didn't have to dig as much dirt. And this was one of the first jumps that really got me super fired up. Soon after, we built Grape Smuggler, and we've got a little clip here to kind of show you what one of my dream trails were, and what really got me excited when I was in my teens and forward. Oh.
That's okay. That's okay. That's what I'm here for.
So this trail took I worked on it for about 5 years. It was a lot of hand built. We used a little bit of machines, and used any lumber that we could get donated to us, including the wall ride that you see there. That was
That's Gary, right?
yeah, that was me. Yeah, so this is a pro at the time, Jeff Golovich. He came out to visit, and I showed him this trail that I built, and it was just super cool to get to go ride with somebody else, and have other people ride these cool features that I dreamed of and thought were really, really, really fun.
Is this Grape Smuggler here?
This is Grape Smuggler. This next jumps, this is FMX. This is another one that's still up there. I think we built this when I was like 15 or something like that. And it was really cool. This we put right at the end of a trail that Douglas Johnson built called Chorus. And it's just really cool. I think, yeah, thank you.
So this is sort of our segue point. You guys, I just want to thank you. You did it. We made it in the time that we were hoping. I was worried about some of these more than others, but you guys did a really good job.
Excuse me, I'm right here.
Yes. So, okay, quick round of applause for our Eras tour. Okay. I want to shift now to more conversation and talking about, so we now have our bearings. I know it was a quick bearings. I know we missed so much. We can't tell nearly as much as we want to tell, but I just wanted everyone to kind of have some of that history before we shift into some of what came next. So Gary's kind of brought us up to, 90s, early 2000s in that zone. And one of the trails that existed at that point that's going to kind of tee up the conversation is, if you don't mind.
Yeah, this next trail is ONT. I'm not entirely sure who exactly built it, but maybe Douglas or some others.
Who built it, Douglas? Okay.
And it started right next to what is now known as Hidden Trail up in Post Canyon. You can see all these super high bridges, nailed to trees. Stuff that is, this is very North Shore, free ride sort of inspired.
Look at this move right there. That was so cool.
Yeah. We don't really build many features like this anymore.
That was awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
So guys, here we've got 34,000 acres of forest, counties managing it. You've got people for thousands of years using it. So they build a trail like this. But then, if you'll notice, this photo here is also of that same trail. So help us shift into, things started to not just be everyone do what you want, everything's copacetic. Maybe Arthur, you can kind of help us segue into what came next.
I can probably talk a little bit. Humans sort of gravitate towards conflict, and clearly there was a bit of a clash of cultures that was going on. There was a lot of, for hundreds of years, people have been developing trails. People have been building the moto trails. People have been building horse trails, and people have been constructing places to shoot guns and to hunt and all sorts of stuff. But this was an era where there was kind of an explosion, where a lot of stuff is happening. It's happening with people, Gary accepted, with people from outside of the community in the classic sense, that these are people who'd been there for maybe 5, 10, 15 years, not 60, 70 years of generational history. So some controversy developed, and you see in the newspaper, you see letters to the editor talking about, what are they doing, making this whole thing just a playground and whatever they want up there? Why isn't the county stopping this? And so you have this great picture of all these serious-looking county commissioners, and I can certainly appreciate the position that they were in, but these very serious-looking county commissioners, and Raylin has a caption there talking about the illegal trails that are happening, and the concept of illegality was thrown around a lot, even though the reality is that pretty much this is a direct extension of what had been happening, just happening at a greater scale. And I think it would be good to hear sort of, Doug was on the side of having to consider what policies were necessary. I was working with Douglas Johnson and folks kind of as an advocate for the use of the forest, and you were up there playing, so we kind of have three different perspectives on what was going on there.
Yeah, this photo is of Dropout, one of those first features there that I rode at Family Man, and that got me so excited. I thought this was awesome.
Yeah.
You were more of this. Awesome. This was more your. I know this comes a little later, but one of the things that I heard you guys, sometimes people from outside the county thought this was the greatest thing ever, and then it was the people inside it who were feeling the conflict.
The same time that there was that article published by Ray Lynn talking about how these illegal things were happening in the forest, the Oregonian published something else. Look at all this really cool stuff happening out in Hood River. So it kind of shows the two sides of it.
Yeah. Were you gonna say something, Doug?
Well, yeah, I mean, I could get into what kind of happened next. You know, we talked about, we got into by the early 2000s, you know, again, we now finally identified on the forestry side, on the county side of things that, hey, we actually have a need for some policy here, because like, we're not supposed to manage for this, or are we? You know, what are we gonna do about this? And there was people on both sides of the argument, very much so. I mean, we had certainly some of the new mountain bike community here that was starting to really get going.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, we had this really important forest resource. There were some people that were wanting to say, well, you know what, we got these trails here, don't cut anything. You know, there was some of that going on. You know, there was also...
Thank you, Dave.
So, but at the
there
same
was
time,
conflict. I mean, I think
there was definitely conflict. Well, that was a little bit, maybe a little bit later.
okay.
But, you know, definitely. So that's something we had to work through. But in 2003, by that time, that'd been boiling probably for close to 5 years already by then. And it finally just came to a head. The commissioners had worked through this and worked on this long enough that in October of 2003, they passed a new recreation trail ordinance for the county. And that was really, really a big step. That was a change. That was a sea change, really, in terms of what was going to happen in the future with trails and the county forest.
Can I just real quick, because I feel like as not a government person, you know, trails and like that was a shift. 2003 was a shift to saying we are now going to start looking at policy that recognizes things.
There was a huge change.
Trail. Yeah.
And
okay.
once they established kind of what direction the commissioners were going to go with that, and there had been a lot of input, and I wasn't here for all of that, but I heard about some of it for sure, because I was in the area. And that ordinance, I'm going to tick off a few things of what that did, and I think it really just set the foundation of where we were going to go. Some of that main aspects of the ordinance, number one, is set the priority for the tree farm to continue managing the trees for revenue to the county general fund, first and foremost. And it said, hey, no part of these trails can stop that. That's priority. That said, the very next thing, the county will work, and the county forestry department will work to create a multi-use trail system on the county forest. Okay, what does that say? Well, it says you're going to do two things, not just one. And a lot of the mindset up to that point, and really in forestry generally, a lot of people would think of things as either or. Like, if you pick this or that, they can't both happen in the same place. But that ordinance right there actually established that we can do both things at the same time. Now, it still took us a little while to put all that together. But that was really important in my mind. Another thing that really helped us in the future, it established a trail committee. So local users, all the different user groups, we're talking everything from hiker, runner, mountain bikes, single track motorcycles, quads, side-by-sides, 4x4s, I missed equestrian in there. You know, all those people would be on this trail committee working with the forestry department and the county, and that established communication, and it created a basis for relationships. Without that happening, we were gonna still have conflict constantly and gridlock, in which case number 1 and 2 wouldn't happen very well. So that trail committee has been really important. Didn't really stop there. There was still more to do, but the other part it said, hey, the forestry department, they're gonna administer the trail system. Okay. And then last thing, it might have gone unnoticed, and generally the people in the trail community of, oh, by the way, you know, if it's not an authorized trail, it's actually not legal. So that was also pretty clear in that. So if people wanted to have trails from that point on, they really did need to try to at least work with the forestry department so that everything was a coordinated action. To me, that set the foundation. Yeah, there was no funding for it. Forestry department, we weren't used to doing trail stuff. We were trained to grow trees and, you know, harvest trees and build roads and things like that. But the trails, that was new to most of us. So we had to learn that. We didn't have funding. We didn't have extra funding for this. A lot of the trails were built on the backs of the people that wanted them. And we already heard from several of them in this room, but there's literally hundreds of people. And it got to the point where you know, this system and what was created, and it was very much a group effort. It started to attract people here, and not just a few people. What we saw in the early 2000s was just a little bit of a symbol of what was to come. You know, what we see today is a whole nother level.
Yeah. I want to go back because when I hear you talk, I mean, my first thought is of young Gary Pash in the woods who's been dreaming at night of the trail he wants and then going up and building it, or riding the stunts and jumps that folks before him have ridden. And this, to me, would sound like a real buzzkill. What do you remember from back then?
I mean, I remember going to those meetings and going to the county, and when they would laugh at me and tell me that I couldn't build whatever I wanted, I'd be like, well, you're not up there to tell me that I can't build it. And so we would definitely do a lot of things, and I would go and find other people that wanted nothing to do with the county, and they were being productive. We were building jumps. That's the goal. So I would just go and help them, and you know, it took time to really start to work together and to create a relationship and to create trust. But at first, it was really something that I wasn't all that excited about, because they didn't take me seriously, and I was being productive. We were building jumps, and that's what mattered.
Well, maybe we could show this right here. Oops, sorry. This one. You'll some of the conflict here played out where someone had lit this one jump on fire. Gary made sure to point out that his jump on the left did not go up in flames.
I did not light the fire.
Okay. So there's conflict, but there's starting to be some resolution that's percolating along. But I know in 2012 something happened, and you know, stop me if I'm getting too far ahead of things, but 2012 seemed to also be a really important milestone of helping things coalesce.
You know, I would start a little bit earlier, because I'm not sure the context of what Doug talked about may be lost on folks who aren't involved in government.
Okay.
The fact is, Doug, if he were in a private corporation making forestry decisions, he would have a fairly broad leeway. When you have a publicly owned forest like this, you have to have this process with hearings and a board of commissioners making decisions, and there is a forest plan which tells Doug what he is allowed to do and what he's not allowed to do. And without understanding that the forester at the time did not have the freedom to say, well, of course it makes sense that recreation can happen up here as long as it doesn't get in the way of our cutting the trees, and we need to cut the trees. Some of that stuff seems really obvious, but it's kind of outside of the way the government works. And so I think that's what forced the creation of the trail ordinance. And then that kind of brings us up to 2012, where you had this massive ice storm, which I guess is what you want to talk about.
Although, you know, you made me think of one thing, which is, so is it unique that Hood River County did that at the time? I mean, this is the thing that Jen brought up that sort of stuck in my head. Is that a unique situation to have a county say, okay, yeah, we're gonna try to do both?
I don't know if it's unique, but it's certainly not common.
Okay.
And I think that we are the model now for many other jurisdictions to look at. And I know Doug give you calls on a regular basis about this stuff, right?
Yep.
You did a tour of the
I've
state
done
parks
multiple-
folks, just a couple of weeks ago. Or a couple
Well,
months ago.
earlier this year, we had certainly that had to do with some of the grants, and they really looked to us as you know, this is actually a pretty good example of how this can be done. But we didn't, that's 2023, 24. You know, this literally took years. It took decades really to get where we are today. And like Gary said, those relationships didn't happen overnight. It actually took years, because it was one individual sometimes at a time. We might get one or two or three people on board. We're still got 5 more to go that are really important, right? So it happened over a period of time. The other thing I'd point out, after that initial trail ordinance stuff, there was more specific policy in terms of how the county forestry manages the trails. That happened over the next 8 years, clear till 2011. Some of that was very detailed. It was a trail management plan that was developed, as well as a trail master plan. And the master plan in particular we had a subcommittee of the trail committee, and I believe they they said they took like 4 years or more to get all the concepts and ideas into that. It wasn't all fully vetted, but at least we kind of had a general idea of, are we going north or south? And it did set a lot of framework.
Yeah.
We've implemented a lot of those things over the last 12 to 15 years now that we're in that trail master plan, but there's still more to do. But that helped us really develop relationships through all of that and get people starting to work in the same direction versus totally opposed.
Yeah.
And but then you hit some bumps along the way sometimes, and I don't know if you want to turn to the slide of 2012 yet.
Well, yeah, I think maybe who's going to be good to kind of set us up for, this was a pivotal year in a lot of ways on multiple fronts.
Yeah, so there were groups. So we have Douglas Johnson, who's here, and he headed this group called Gorge Freeride Association, GFRA. Been building trails since probably about 2000, right? And there was a group called CAMBA that was mostly working in Washington, but also had activity over here. There was a lot of sort of loose organization, but there was kind of a couple of during the year before this event. There were meetings that had started to look at whether we need sort of a more focused effort. So I'm, at this point, I'm not on the government side of things. I'm on the side of working with folks like Douglas and Gary and helping them understand how to interact with government. So groups starting to realize we need to organize a little bit more, even though most trail builders hate to go to meetings. They hate to talk about things that you can and can't do. In fact, they simply will not show up at most of that stuff. But we needed to form intermediary organizations so that that communication could happen, so that folks like Doug or his predecessors had someone to actually talk to. And so the discussions had started happening, and then in the winter of 2011, 2012, there was this massive ice storm. And the ice storm, pretty much every tree got coated in thick coats of ice, and then winds came through, and at certain levels, every tree either got snapped off at a certain height or pulled up so there's a root ball exposed and shown. I'm not even sure what photos we have, but yeah, you have to get in really close and realize that those are all just root balls. You would walk through at the Seven Streams level, and there were craters. The Seven Streams Trail was simply a series of craters with tiny little pieces of trail connecting them. And that made it clear that if we as enthusiasts didn't really organize well to mobilize people for the rebuilding of the forest, that it would not happen. And kind of the analogy I use is that Post Canyon in many ways is like an Etch-a-Sketch, and every couple of decades it gets shaken up, and either fire comes through or ice storm comes through or logging comes through, and you get kind of a blank slate. And I think in a lot of ways that's cool, because it lets people like Gary and Douglas build new stuff, but it's kind of frustrating because you need a ton of energy and effort to do that. So that brings us up to that period.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that was kind of my first experience with Etch-a-Sketch of Post Canyon. My trail, Grape Smuggler, that I'd worked on for so long, literally there was a tree down like every 10 feet. You know, the work it would take to like rebuild it was just way too much to even think about that. I didn't even want to get there. Another issue with it was that I had built it on a skid road because it was kind of a clear corridor, so I could build the size of jumps that I wanted to. Of course, were you working yet?
I was here.
Yeah, Doug went and ran a skidder up it, and they literally obliterated the entire trail. There was like 2 features that didn't get touched, and the rest of it was just absolutely destroyed. And so like Etch-a-Sketch, that was my first experience with that.
And how about Mobius? I mean, Doug Van Zandt built Mobius, which you folks probably know now is a trail that runs through this nice clear cut. It was through the forest. He built it, and it was used for less than a season when the windstorm came, the ice storm came, knocked all this stuff down. County went in, did salvage logging. His entire hillside was removed. He had to then mobilize to rebuild the trail there, entirely different trail than he had worked for a couple of years to build.
Yeah, that whole clear cut that Cleeway goes through now was wiped clean that next spring by Doug and his crew.
Can you?
Doug?
Like, I got a little bit to add there.
Go for it.
Yeah, a little bit to add.
Fair enough.
So,
Fair enough.
that was a pretty impressive ice storm for those that lived through it. I mean, things were kind of shut down for a week or two for the most part. And it really put things, it was a mess in the woods everywhere. People couldn't even get to the trails, let alone, I mean, the roads were closed, especially as you go up into the woods. It was my first full year. Like, I started in April of 2011.
Welcome to the Gorge.
We had worked pretty hard. I'd put quite a bit of thought into my harvest plans for the next, what does the next 5-10 years look? I started to think about, I'm going to get all this scheduled out. I have it all figured out. That ice storm changed my harvest plans for the next 3 years completely. I literally just didn't even look at what I had planned, and I had to go out and look at salvage and harvesting some of these units that were worst hit. And literally for the next 3 years, that's all we were targeting. And this was one of the first ones that we got to, just because it was lower elevation. It was the first thing we could get to. Plus, in addition to the specific harvest areas that Gary and Arthur referenced there, along 7 Streams and Mobius and where the Cleeway is now, that was Clematis timber sale. But we had a lot of salvage just scattered everywhere. I mean, all the trails pretty much were hit one way or another. Mm-hmm. Trails like Gary's Grape Smuggler, on that side of things, that close to 140 and some of that stuff up in there now. We had to salvage in there extensively over probably a 2-year period. So we are hitting trails left and right. But I will say, shortly after that ice storm, so it kind of straddled the end of January and early February, and by about the second week of February or so, maybe the 7th, somewhere in there, we scheduled our first trail meeting, and it was an emergency. Like, the phones were ringing off the hook.
So the group that you've been working to coalesce.
Just starting.
Yeah.
I mean, the trail committee had been meeting already, but
Yeah.
I was pretty new to that group,
Yeah.
right? People are trying to figure me out a little bit, like, what is he going to do?
Yeah.
And, one of the messages with this is, again, we make these plans, and they're all great, and sometimes they get broken. But one of the things that I really tried to promote to the committee is say, look, we're gonna get through this. Stuff's gonna get rebuilt. It's gonna get relocated. We already knew some trails over time, they were gonna get moved around and changed anyways. This was a change agent, big time. And it kind of created that canvas for us. The Etch-a-Sketch just got shaken. But one of the concepts I really promoted is none of these trails are really forever. They're all dynamic. It's in a dynamic system. The forest is dynamic, the streams are dynamic, our roads change, even our roads change over time sometimes. And some of these things happen, it's not our schedule. We just have to react, sometimes respond. And really the response was, again, we're committed to a trail system, and how do we make it better? And, one of the unique things that I will say is pretty unique in Hood River is that people know how to gear up and put in the elbow grease, and they're willing to volunteer.
Yeah.
When I talk to other groups and from other areas in Washington and stuff, they're lucky if they can scrape together 6 or 8, 10 people.
Yeah.
And I'll say,
Yeah,
some of these groups like H-Rats,
Yeah. That's
they
a
put
good
out
segue.
the bill.
That's
They put out the bill. They got 100 people now.
Yeah, I think maybe so we talk about the forest side of this period. Maybe would you be up for sort of taking us to the people side? Like, this ice storm happens, moment
Sure.
of silence for Grape Smuggler.
Yeah,
And what
Grape
else?
Smuggler's gone. We're not even going to talk about that anymore. But soon after, we were able to get Cleeway approved, and with a bunch of help, a bunch of motivation, HRATs really helping organize and getting people together. I remember that was really a big turning point, and really shifted the way that we started to build trails up there, because it went from Grape Smuggler, which took me like 5 years, and we would have these small groups of like 5 or maybe 10 people if we were lucky, like 1 or 2 times, But then after that, when we were working on Cleeway and getting all these other trails back open, brushing, cleaning stuff up, fixing all these big bomb holes that Arthur was talking about that were all over the forest, we would have work parties, and there would be like 100 or 120 people. And, that's a whole different animal that you have to contain. But it was just so fun, because we built Cleeway, which was like a mile long, in like 1 year. It was just like bing. it appeared, and that was awesome. And thanks to HRATs and everybody. And that's the cool thing that gets me so excited about this community, is that we can organize people. We get people so excited, and they're passionate people that are here and ready to put in the work. And with everybody's help, like, it's amazing. We can literally move mountains. Like, we can build trails so much faster now because we're organized, we're working together, and we know that, you know, many hands make light work. And that really started to change with this storm. And
Yeah, maybe can you help me understand why before the storm, even though we're starting to get organized, you didn't necessarily see that kind of turnout, and then in the time around the storm and following, like, what went on that shifted the community to have now suddenly hundreds of people showing up? And what made it more organized?
I would say that there were kind of like two big players. One thing that happened, Matt Klee, RIP, passed away right around then. And then we had this ice storm, and everybody realized that if we didn't work together, that trails were going to take forever to get opened. And so everybody rallied. HRATs got more organized, started communicating better. Everybody was excited to get together and help, because we realized that if we didn't work together, like, the trails were never going to get opened because there were trees down everywhere. And it was just such a big lift that the community just showed up.
Yeah, so I'd like to get a few names out there,
Please
because I
do.
think that that's kind of important. So the historian part of it.
Yep.
And I actually just dug up the first quote-unquote HRATs email. I was at a meeting at the White Buffalo. Mike Estes and Sam Pinner called a meeting saying, hey, we should get together and figure out how to organize better to do more mountain bike stuff. They'd come up from Bend and wanted stuff to be more like Bend. Why isn't Hood River like Bend? The question that as a mayor I got all the time. And just some pretty obvious reasons, but they don't have to say any more, good. So 2 meetings at the White Buffalo, and then they did the smartest thing they could have ever done, which is to get Matt Klee involved in it. So the next meeting was in Jen's living room, and I know Jen was there and probably remembers that meeting where, oh, there you are, Jen, okay, good. So that meeting happened there, and there was an energy that started to develop there, and people like Heather Polag became involved, and people were really good at just getting people excited about things. And we had, even before the ice storm, we had some trail parties with 50, 60, 70 people, and that's pretty amazing. And what I've heard from we're talking to people about carbon credits in the forest now, and what I've heard from them is that we have what's called a charismatic forest. That this is a forest that people appreciate and they can enjoy and that they can see. And so that's more than just a working forest. It's a forest that people can feel themselves part of. And so it's not hard to get people locally involved, but when you talk about Cleeway, what happened there is it was really easy to get Travel Oregon to give us a ton of money to build Cleeway, because they saw this as something that they could get good press from. And so they provided the money for all the heavy equipment that was necessary to do that. And then we managed to get all the volunteers together. And before you know it, you've got, we had a work party with 160, 170 people. And just the logistics of that, you think about how many different trail bosses you need, because you can't just send people off and say, go build a trail. Each person who has never done this before is going to need someone directing them, and I've got photographs showing a trail boss directing people as they're throwing branches, because just a lineup of people who have never been in the woods doing this sort of thing before are just clearing the branches from a trail, and there are a lot of branches every place. And it became an activity that people could really become part of and feel good about and be up in the woods and have a good time, and people had barbecues up there, were making bacon to feed us, and it really just developed a community, and from there it just kept going. So in a sense, the ice storm was the best thing that could have happened. The timing of it was almost perfect and entirely accidental, because all of the initial organizational work had happened just before then. And it was like, if you had asked for something to allow this group to mobilize, that's what happened.
So that moves us into looking ahead now. And one of the things that I wanted to hear from you, Gary, is if you could maybe talk to us about how trail building has evolved, from however long it took and how you built them back in the day and how others built them, in the early years, to what it looks like now.
Is it still 100 drums per mile?
I wish. That would be awesome. So these days, we have a good relationship with the county. And that being said, there's still a lot of conversation that is a conversation. But we are able to use machines up there, which allows us to move a lot more dirt a lot faster than with shovels, and with a different amount of manpower. And therefore, we're able to make a plan and focus on certain progressions and to build in these skills and to focus on being able to teach people how to build or how to ride jumps and to teach people how to help build trail and to really kind of go through our Etch-a-Sketch of trails and start over every once in a while, just like what we did at Family Man with the current thinning and then the rebuild that has been going on for the last couple of years. We wiped the slate clean and we came back, we started with machines, and now we're finishing with by hand and cleaning things up. Now we have a lot more experience. When I was a kid, and you saw all those log rides and everything, we were honestly just figuring it out is honestly what it seemed like. But now there's been 25 years of trail work and building, and we have these awesome bike parks like Whistler Bike Park that has these trails that are 20 years old, and they're able to have tens of thousands of people ride these trails every single day, and therefore you learn what works and what doesn't work. And I feel like as local trail builders and the entire industry, we've learned a lot about what works and what doesn't, what bikes are good and what bikes are not good. And from that, it's kind of really helped guide us into this new lens where we can, move through trail building and designing with this knowledge that we have now. And I think that's really fun. It gets me excited.
I'm curious for both, for Doug and Gary in particular. You have to jump through more hoops and ask for permission to build things that maybe in the past you didn't have to, and that adds a layer for you to do what you want to do.
Oh, for sure.
You now have to. You can't just go harvest the trees you want to harvest. I mean, you can because that's the first priority, but you have taken on this second priority that maybe you didn't necessarily have to. I'm curious from both of your perspectives, what do you see now that we're, this far in as the benefits of having this relationship that means more work but maybe is of service to both? I'm curious.
I think a really key is both sides have to realize not everything is absolute. We got to work together to both get what we want. And it again, as I mentioned, dynamic system, and that even sometimes that's timber harvest. That still happens. And we don't final harvest those trees. We're on a pretty long rotation here at the county, so it's pushing 90 years for a lot of our stuff. It doesn't happen quite. There's some intermediate thinnings, and sometimes you have salvage, but you can't always time that. Some of the conversations I have with when people put in a trail proposal, and even before it goes to the trail committee, I'm saying, you realize 5 to 10 years, this stand's probably going to get cut. You still willing to do that?
Yeah, Doug tells me that every time we walk in the woods.
and the answer I get is, that's okay. If I can have this for 5 years, it's worth it.
I guess what I'm curious from your standpoint is, like, when another county calls you and says, hey, we see you've done this, like, should we do it? What are the benefits? I mean, why are you doing it at this point?
Well, again,
because it was handed to you and you had to? I mean,
well,
what do you say to them?
One of the questions I had when I first came on to my boss at that time, the county administrator was David Merriweather, and I said, so how much of this do we have to do? Like, is there like a number, like so many miles, or I mean, what? Oh, there's nothing. You know, but what I'll say is again, it was really clear to me anyways, that there was an opportunity here. And again, a lot of people come into this stuff, it's either or. And I was like, you know, there's a lot of benefits here. We're reconnecting people to the woods. We're not saying stay out, can't use it. And it is a little different. Yeah, sometimes things are gonna get disturbed, yeah, and it's from logging too. But if you have the relationship and they kind of know that it's coming most of the time, that helps a lot. If you don't do that, we can't use the space the same way. That's the trade-off. And I will say we're probably one of the most popular mountain bike systems just for mountain bikes, and we are a multi-use system, just to be clear. But on the mountain bike side, we're one of the most popular systems in Oregon, if not the most popular. So the results bear out that we're probably doing something right. Even though we do a timber program, it's not hamstringing us on the trail side, for the most part. And likewise, we can still have the trails. It's not hamstringing what we do on the timber side. Is it a little more effort and a little more trouble, maybe administratively? Absolutely. I mean, it takes us more effort to do the extra communication. When we have to close areas for a sale or forest management, it's a lot of work to try to get that word out, get it out correctly, get it signed correctly, and then take it all down when it's done.
Yeah.
That's quite a lot of effort. But to me, when I look at the management plan, that was the directive. And you look at the benefits to the community. People literally move here for this, and they have been doing that for a good while, like over 15, probably 20 years or more. And so, why not?
And I'm curious, so as a trail builder, I mean, do you get benefits from this relationship as much as it's probably a hassle at times? And
I mean, yeah, first of all, we have this, right? We can build trails up in Post Canyon. We can ride, a lot of people can ride from town, from their house, into Post. Like, I think that's pretty special. Something that is sometimes hard for me to remember, being that I'm like a very mountain bike focused trail builder. I love jumps more than anything. Not everybody loves jumps. I know this, I have to remind myself. You know, this is a community, this is a county forest, so that means there are equestrians, that means there are motos, there are bikes, hikers, runners. There are so many people that are up there using this forest. We gotta remember that Hood River County Forestland is not just Post Canyon Mountain Bike Park, but it is the Hood River County trail system. So we have to remember that we got to work with equestrians and with motos and with the bikes. Everybody has to get along, which definitely takes more effort. It takes a lot more communication. We don't always get what we want. I've proposed a lot of trails and been told that we can't do it because of X, Y, and Z. And so you have to adjust. You have to go to a different place in the forest to be able to build the trails that you want. And yes, that is a pain. Sometimes I'm extremely frustrated because the terrain is different. And maybe I want to build a trail in a specific area because of terrain. But if there are other users there, we might not be able to do that. And sometimes that is a difficult conversation to have. Sometimes that is a conversation that should continue, and we should always make sure that everybody is getting what they need and what our trail master plan has laid out for us. And you know, so that has its benefits and its drawbacks. And as a jump-focused mountain biker, I always try and remember that what I like is not always what everybody likes. So
and you got a 10-week-old who's going to be riding here before long, I'm sure.
yeah, I can't wait. It's going to be so fun. It definitely changes the way, you know, I'm not building necessarily the biggest jumps up there anymore, but
We've already got the
focused on
Strider.
progression.
We already got the Strider run set up.
Yeah, that's right.
Alex, if you will bring the lights up, I want to, this is a chance now to bring the community in with some questions that you might have. We're going to run a little bit later than usual because there's so many good things here, and I want to hear from all of you. So, who has questions? Yes, sir. And if someone in the audience who has knowledge of all this has an answer, when they don't, feel free to pipe up. Oh, can you say your name before you ask?
My name's Cully. I moved here 10 years ago because of mountain bikes. Not entirely, but that was a big part of why I moved here. My question is about Family Man. I mean, as an enthusiast, we kind of hear, and a member of HRATS and someone who helps with trail building, but you hear all kinds of rumors about what could have happened and what might happen. And it seemed like the kind of agreement that the bikers and the county came to with Family Man is like it's like a big testament to that cooperation, because we had heard, that Family Man was going to get completely, bowled over, going to have to like truly shake up the Etch-a-Sketch on that one, and that's such a central hub, and then it seems like that didn't happen, that it was thinned. And I guess I'm just curious about the background of that, because it seems like testament to that cooperation between recreation and forestry.
Yeah, that came through, and I think, sometimes, and Gary mentioned this before, sometimes you gotta wait a while, you might get a no. I think we had a number of trail constituents, probably at least a couple, that wanted to rebuild parts of Family Man, and Tim might remember some of this better than I do, but Tim Mixon with HRATS, but I think initially some of the initial conversations about that, we weren't quite ready for it. We didn't maybe flesh it out all the way, but pretty soon people were like, no, we really want this. And in fact, I think they originally almost presented some of the ideas and proposals for the Family Man area, actually ended up in the commissioner's lap for a little bit there first. And then we kind of had to kind of get back in with that. But part of it is I kind of had known for a few years that I was going to have to thin that stand. Just to keep it going, it's pretty low elevation, pretty prone to, at that level, pretty hot in the summer, a little bit more, and the trees are getting pretty good size in there, but if you're going to continue to manage that for a lot longer, say 20 or 30 years even, you need to thin it once in a while. So it was time. And so knowing that, the last thing I wanted was someone to put a bunch of effort into redoing all those trails, and I come in a year later and thin it. And so we had to kind of get on the same page. Once we kind of agreed on what that would look like, it fell into place pretty quickly, actually. And we started to work more with the people, the proponents, to do that. We brought in a few extra people as well. Gary was one of those. There's more than I can mention, so I'm leaving people out. I mean, Douglas Johnson. There's a whole bunch of people before it was all done involved in the actual rebuild. We ended up getting some grant money for that as well. The use of Family Man has increased. So we needed some more restrooms. There was a line at the restroom. There was one hole in the ground, and so there would be a line when there's certain events there and stuff. It was over capacity, and so it was really successful. The other thing is the main road went through that staging area the way it was originally designed. We never really realized so many people were going to use that, and so we kind of built it around the existing road. We ended up with that timber sale to thin it and another harvest unit just down the road. We were able to completely pay for a road to bypass Family Man so that I didn't have to send log trucks through a staging area where kids were sprawled out in the middle of the road with their bikes. That just doesn't mix, and we didn't think about that before it got busy. We didn't worry about it too much. It wasn't a thing 15 years ago, but it did change. The amount of use has changed. So even as we go, we have to replan and think about how's it being used. Is it working or not? Not everybody's thinking at it. They might just be thinking, hey, I want this kind of trail. But there's the facilities to go with it.
I'm going to hold you. I'm going to hold you right there just because I want to get to some more questions, and then they'll be available afterwards. Oh my gosh, Heather, you're so far away. I gotta come. Jeez, I gotta pass the mic.
I've heard HRATS mentioned a number of times here, and I know my grandson has talked about volunteering with HRATS. I don't really know what HRATS is, and so could somebody explain that? If it's an organization or what?
So I can do that really briefly. HRATS is a 501c3, which was formed to do trail advocacy, specifically focusing on the Post Canyon area, as well as the Whoopty Trail area, which is on the Hood River Mountain on the, I always get my east and west confused, on the east side mountains. And it's been around, as I talked about when it was formed, and it's probably a good place to start if you have interest in becoming involved in working on trails, because there's always activities going on, there's always projects going on, and you can hook up with somebody, and trail builders are often needing help during the week, on weekends, whatever, and there's always ways to get involved. There's Instagram, and there was a QR code out there that you can, it was your nephew, I think you said? Grandson, yeah. So there's an Instagram QR code out there, and that would probably be a great place to start. Hood River Area Trail Stewards. And what I discovered when I looked through the old emails was that wasn't the original name. It was Hood River Trails Collaborative, I think was the first two emails. Yeah.
Hi, Dan Dye here. Thanks for putting this on. This is fantastic. Quick question, though. Mount Hood, obviously we're talking Post Canyon here. Mount Hood Forest is adjacent, is really close. So just curious as to what level of discussions, or really why don't we have trails in Mount Hood? So it's kind of, I'll leave it at that.
So I can take that one. So I am actually on the board of another organization called 44 Trails, and we kind of do the equivalent of the mountain bike trail activity in the federal forest. Reason why it's done separately from HRATs is that it's an entirely different form of trail advocacy. We just got a feature built that we started working on, I think, 16 years ago. So working with the federal environment takes quite a bit longer, but the flip side of it is that when you build something there, it's built forever. So you design a new trail, you build a new trail up there, and it is part of the system, and theoretically is, there's not logging that's going to be cutting it down. It's not going to be removed. So there is trail work that's happening. Now, if you're looking at other areas of the forest, we are also surrounded, our county forest is surrounded by wilderness area, which under the Wilderness Act of 1964, we can't have mountain biking happening in that, and trail building there is very limited. The sorts of activities that are there are very limited.
Okay. You get on that, Dan.
We can talk later.
Yeah. All right, I can do one more question, and then we got one little final thing, and then afterwards people will stick around. You can talk if you want.
Thank you all again. My name's Nick, and I have a question about whether anyone's ever done an economic study. So the question is, Post Canyon is phenomenal for us mountain bikers. It provides timber, money for the county. But surely someone must have looked at how much money it brings in to the restaurants, the hotels, the bike shops, and it seems like a win-win-win to me.
So I swear I did not plant this question, but this is something that I have spent quite a bit of time looking at from two different perspectives. So the fact is, in my view, what people don't realize is tourism actually is not the primary industry in Hood River County. It accounts for something around 10% of the revenue locally. So it's important, but and certainly if you own a restaurant, it's extremely important. And you look at the crowds of people, you see the gear outside of the Hood River Taqueria after a nice day, so you know that it has a clear impact there. But what I look at is that if you go to each of the major industrial producers in Hood River, you go to Tofurkey, you go to Full Sail, Duquesne used to be Cloud Cap in situ. You talk to the chief executives of those companies. They are here because of the recreational aspects. So really, the economic driver of this community, not the tourism, but the recreation that comes out of having these things. Tourists coming and using it, that's great. That brings more stuff in. We have better restaurants than we have any right to have. But that's really not the center of the economic engine. The economic engine is the fact that we have all of this, that we attract the best and the brightest here to start their companies here because they like to live here. And that's actually been the situation going back to 1900, where we know that the wonderful area to live, it did not escape people. When they were recruiting Midwestern farmers out to the Hood River Valley in 1900 to 1915, they were showing pictures of the same things that we get excited about now, and that's what brought people and brought their families out here.
Thank you. So, this is where I want you to tee up your story. We have
Okay.
so much more that we could talk about, you guys. You, boy, we'll do some more on this topic in the future. Arthur has a little parting mountain bike history treat for everyone that he's going to tee up. And while he does that, I want to tell you, next month, January 15th, we have of salmon and basketball. You guys, thank you so much. February 15th, we have a talk on called Of Salmon and Basketball with someone who I've known for many years, Buck Jones. He's a member of the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation and also works for CRITFIC, Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission. He is one of those people I've known for years. Every time I talk to him, there'd be some little nugget of a story that I'd be like, what? Really, that too? And he knows this place in some really unique ways and has a really unique story, and we're really fortunate he's going to come spend the night talking with us. I also want to give you a heads up that you may have seen we have something coming called the Watershed Rock Opera. This is our 15th anniversary, and to celebrate it, we are throwing a really big, crazy multimedia performance party in April. So there will be 4 performances of this event that will feature nearly 24 local performers and musicians. It's 5 movements of music, all composed by a local composer. It will follow the watershed beginning in the sky, the creation story. The water will go to the mountain, and we will meet a wild, feisty biologist who is studying a native creature that not long ago we knew very little about. Then we'll follow the water down to the orchards, and we'll meet a 4th-generation pear farmer and go through the cycles of a pear season. Then the water's gonna come here into the city, and we have a very, very serious performance about wastewater management. Lyrics by our own local Molly Schwartz. If you know her, you have an idea of what's coming. And then the last movement, the water moves out to the river. So stay tuned. We will be releasing tickets at the end of February. If you have donated, you will be the first to find out. If you are a Sense of Place sponsor, you will be the next to find out, and so on and so forth. So stay tuned. It's like a love letter to the Gorge, but with more percussion. So stay tuned. I also want to thank our volunteers. We have amazing volunteers who you guys meet on the way out. They give their time to help make this happen, and we're a small nonprofit with a small team and a small budget, and we just couldn't do without them. I want to thank CCA for hosting us and letting us use their live stream equipment, Mount Adams Institute, Columbia Gorge News and Healthy Community Collective, our sponsors, of course, many of whom have been with us for 15 years and come back again and again and let me hassle them every fall for money, and they give it to me again and again, which is great. I want to thank Kyle. I was trying to think of a bike riding pose. Is it like this kind of?
No.
Okay. All right, sorry guys. Did I stop? Okay, sorry, that's a little thing. Yeah. I also want to thank TJ Maloney, who took my call and, sorry, threw you under the bus. I want to thank the many, many mountain bikers who I know work on trails, are here tonight. We're building trails when this was not being done, and continue to help make it a place for folks like me, and folks like Gary, and folks like Arthur, and folks like my kids and his kids. It is really a true testament to the biking community here that we have this, and I'm grateful for it. I want to thank Jen Klee for getting this started, and Matt in Extension by that, and also Les Perkins. Thanks to H-Rats for helping organize herding a lot of cats. The community volunteers, all of you here who use the trails, build the trails, and care for them, whether you're on mountain bikes or walking your dog. I just think that's part of the reason we have such a unique situation here. And I want to thank all of you here in the audience. Thank you so much for coming tonight. And with that,
You ready?
I think I'm ready, but I just wanted to, because I know once you're done, people are going to leave. I wanted to thank you 3. You guys put in the work to help make this happen. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, go for it. Yep,
Oh, you want me to do that?
go for it. Say it and then
Okay.
do your story.
Okay, so, I'm sorry, at the end or before?
No, do it right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the Board of Commissioners has requested a planning process to be initiated where we have requested a rework of the county forest plan with especially to look at making sure that the forest plan appropriately acknowledges and directs the recreation that happens up in the forest. So this is a big thing that happens every 10, 15, 20 years max. And that process has just started. We do not yet have any hearings scheduled, but keep your ears open, keep your eyes open. If you want to help tell Doug what his role is in the future, which is effectively what this is, that's the process to become involved in.
You're a good man, Doug. You're a good man.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so now, so this is a completely different job of mine. So I am the volunteer photo archivist at the History Museum, the History Museum of Hood River County. And I was preparing a talk a while back, and I found this photograph. And one of the great things is when I get to scan a photo like this, I get to see it in detail that no one else gets to see. And I get to really zoom in and see every detail on a very fine-grained scan. So I found this photo. This is Willis Thornberry in 1910, and he is hauling supplies up to Greenpoint, which is now Kingsley. So he's hauling supplies up to that huge mill that you saw. And I wanted to know I want to know everything about this photo. So I zoomed in and I looked at this team of, it looks like horses and mules. Or someone may tell me those are donkeys instead of mules. I don't know the difference. I grew up in New York, just for the record. And you look at just the bridles and the tack associated with this. And then you look at Willis Thornberry himself, and you see kind of the character of the man who was doing this. And you look at the wagon, and you see, I just love the brake mechanism on this wagon. You look at the big brake shoe on the rear wheel and the lever next to the driver and the ratchet mechanism and how the axles work and all of that stuff. And then I got back to this. And what I realized was in 1910, Willis Thornberry was running shuttles down from Kingsley.
There you go. Thank you all. Thank you to you guys. We'll see you next month. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you all. Get involved in your local trails.
Thank you.